Well, good evening, Swami.
Shall we start?
Please do.
Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all.
Well, how lovely.
So, this is a chapter called The Existence of God, and it's in a section of Volume 1, which was also a separate book at one time, called The Divine Principle of Man by Swami Abhedananda, who was the head of the New York Vedanta Society for many years and a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna.
Now that leads to an interesting question. You think he was here till 1920 for sure?
Yes.
And left about that year?
Yes.
Well, this is just a footnote to history, but it's a lot of fun for us. The daughter of one of the vice presidents of the United States, whose name was Levi Morton, that's the father's name, donated money or built or, purchased the quarters of the Vedanta Society, which is now the West Side Center in New York. And that center goes back quite a ways because I'm not quite sure when the people that occupy that building now, but Swami asked for two of his own disciples to come to this country. Swami Bodhananda, who eventually came then to the society in New York, founding the Vedanta Society. Oh, but Swamiji himself founded the Vedanta Society before he left. And, being a kind of a structuralist or an orthodox in this particular regard for humorous reasons, that's the one center I'm sure he started because he left a president and all that kind of stuff. This is Vedanta Society in New York. So my question is, was Abhedananda in an entirely different location? He was a direct disciple, of course, of Sri Ramakrishna, whom Swamiji asked to come to this country. I'd like to get that cleared up in my mind, the temperate. But Levi Morton's daughter, the vice president, he was vice president during Benjamin Harrison's career, which is quite far back into the late 19th century. So anyway, there you go. He was there long enough in New York, Abhedananda, to soak in, which we Americans, we gringos, really admire in a Swami. And all of the earliest ones, these disciples and so many of the early ones, virtually all of the third generation that came, they just soaked in American sociology. And they caught it. They made an effort. They caught American cultural orientations. It's a fascinating thing. So, for example, the cultural issues of the day that were very big, like evolution, so I was right on top of that one, Swami Vedanta. Matter of fact, didn't you find that all that we were reading in the psychology department felt very contemporary?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Very contemporary. Okay, buddy, why don't we dive in now? See what we come up with.
The existence of God. Human minds seem to have almost exhausted their reasoning powers in producing all kinds of arguments that can be given both for and against the existence of God. For hundreds of years, philosophers, scientists, and theologians among all nations have been bringing forward proofs either to show that there is such a being as God or to deny his existence entirely. Of course, most of the arguments and proofs in favor of the existence of God are convincing to those who already have some sort of belief in the Creator or some conception of the Supreme Being. If we have been brought up in an atmosphere where there prevails a belief in God as the Creator and ruler of the universe, or as an extra mundane being, who, dwelling outside of nature, commands everything and directs the movements of the world, then unconsciously we breathe in and imbibe that belief from our childhood. And as we grow older, we accept all the arguments and evidences that we can find in support of this preconceived idea. If we have already a conception of God as the first cause, then all the inductions and inferences which maintain that idea will naturally appeal to us, and we shall take them for granted. But those whose minds are not biased or influenced by any such idea, belief, or conception, those who are able to examine these proofs critically in the light of modern science, applying logic and reason, and those who freely investigate nature, searching for an extra cosmic creator and ruler of the universe, may fail to find any convincing proof, and may therefore deny the existence of God as such, or as the first cause of all.
Why is it fun, Swami?
Okay. Well, it's actually just the end of a page. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, since I asked you to, let's put it. I satisfy the apple.
We all know how the theory of evolution has revolutionized the old idea of the special creation of the world out of nothing at some definite period of time. Those who found consolation in the design theory and held it to be the most unassailable ground in favor of the existence of an omnipotent designer are now hopelessly discouraged by the introduction of Darwinian theories of natural selection and sexual selection. By these theories, we can explain almost all of the so-called designs of the Creator. Moreover, the design argument cannot make clear why, under the government of a just, omnipotent, and omniscient ruler, such disorders as the volcanic eruptions on the island of Martinique, or of the plagues, famines, and other disasters which devastate different countries, destroying hundreds of thousands of innocent living creatures. The design theory cannot trace the causes of such disasters, for if there were a designer, his design should be perfect, and there should be harmony instead of discord.
Well, he sure hits the current things. You know, when Swami Vedanta gets up to bat, to me it's a little like batting practice, which usually precedes the all-star game between the two major leagues in baseball. And one night they get up there ahead of the game and they just swing away at fairly easy pitches, one batter, and tries to hit every last one of them out of the ballpark, you know. So he whales away at, as I say, the issues of the age. And believe it or not, they're not so far back in time. This idea, I mean, isn't it kind of fun that he's gone through these things? If you're born in a household where mom and pop have these ideas, however similar or slightly dissimilar they may be, somehow we breathe that in, and it makes you wonder. He's quite right that therefore, you know, whatever atmosphere you're part of there, it goes and kind of accumulates. But I've often wondered even about that. I found in a small school in a bunch of brownstone houses that look just like the West Side Center in New York. It's a typical brownstone house of New York City. Going through 12 grades with sometimes the same students, even two more for kindergarten, that as I began to find out, just sort of incidentally, it was never front and center stage, what church they went to or synagogue, the denomination, I had an almost prepaid, predisposed feeling about these denominations. Now, where did that come from? A rather strong emotional feeling, and nobody had to sit down and tell me, well, now these people believe like this, and even in the same river of faith, you're going to find different expressions, and Some of them are more old-timey and old-fashioned or like orthodox, and some are more. Nobody had to do that, but I had a feeling about every child in the class, and sometimes their fathers. One of them was the daughter of a Lutheran pastor, and I don't mean in high school. I mean, teeny tiny one. And the other one, oh my goodness, John Stewart. He called himself John Charles Stewart. He called him the Great. He called himself the Great. He was just wonderful. These kids, some of them were very, very bright. Another one was the son of another divinity school teacher. John Stewart's father taught at the General Theological Seminary way downtown, which means old New York in the 20 streets, where the Dutch were and all of that. And it was like going to England. I used to spend Halloween and Thanksgiving there over the weekend because it was like a little English village. I think many Episcopal churches are like little villages, each one. So here his Episcopal daddy would sit to pick up his children, one girl and one boy, at the end of school. And he was an older man by that time, white-haired, and he had his collar on backwards. That was so fascinating to me because in part of town I was, we didn't know about collars on backwards. And I knew I loved to go to this boy's home and that they were different, a little different than we, everybody's different from it. So I don't know, were we born with these preconceived ideas? We were talking just today about the idea in India, call it mythology, whatever you like, that we pick out our own parents. India has that no, it's hard. That probably God gives us a choice, according to, well, I've got this available, that available, what would you like, sort of. But that we choose our own parents. So all I'm saying is that everything he says here, because he's coming at it fresh, this is way before the big argument about design, intelligent design, which is what maybe they had those concepts in, but that's...
Can't you tell your story about the father that believed in evolution and the mom that was...
All right, but that's Swami Swananda's story. It's a great one. Talk about difference of opinion about these things in one family. Swami Swananda was our best joke teller. Swami, he really was. Swami Prabhupada founded the place. We always laugh at his jokes, but usually because he got words mixed up or something. And he'd laugh at it, very, very funny. But Swami was really kind of partial. One of his greatest was a little boy went to his mama. And he said, Mommy, and she said, yes, what is it? And he said, where do I come from? And she said, you come from angels, dear. So then he made the mistake that I like to say none of us make, going to a different Swami and asking him the same question. You don't want to do that. It's kind of like the rabbis, 3 rabbis, you have 4 different opinions, but you don't want to get your mind all messed, your hair all messed. But he did. He went to Dad, old Dad. He said, Dad, he said, where do I come from? And he said, from monkeys. So he goes back to Mom. He says, Mom, he says, I asked you where I came from, and you said angels. And I went to Dad and asked him where I came from, and he said monkeys. She said, that's your father's side of the family. All right. All right. So these are current issues: first cause, design, purpose, or just a random motion of molecules in the void. That goes back to Lucretius, way back to the Greek and Roman materialists, which many scientists, sort of secular scientists, have come to the idea. And there's at least 2 of us in the room tonight that I know have a little bit of difficulty looking at the Earth that we think of as composed of brown molecules, and then looking carefully and lovingly and reverently at a flower and seeing what has happened to this random motion of molecules in the void with little tippy tips of the same color in each parallel at the same, that even an artist would have a hard time with a paint putting right there. Swami showed us a flower today, a jasmine. Beautiful little 5 petals with a little dot, almost indentation, isn't it? A little dot in the 5 points. Hey, random motion of molecules in the void. Now, I'm not going to fall into the trap of being labeled a fundamentalist by saying intelligent design. just out of the gate. But I have a hard time. In other words, we have a lot of scientists. We have a lot of God is scientists, God the scientist lectures here. Sometimes we also have to include God the artist. So anyway, whatever it's all about. Now then, here we go. We've got a big chunk here. Geez, I know that. He gives us a lot to think about. The monotheistic, is that right? Yeah, religions, all right, have tried to, and incidentally, India is the primary, most ancient monolithic religion. All these Westerns jump up and down, get so excited to see all these marionettes sitting there. They think they're all gods. Hey, Vedanta, way under BC, when the people discovered what they were working on already in India, the gift of meditation, they discovered everything, union with God. They learned that there is only one shining infinity. There can only be one infinity. Okay, so the monotheistic religions have tried to explain the cause of all the disorders that occur in the universe by the theory of a creator, capital C in this case, of evil, as distinct and separate from the designer, capital D, of good. Now hang on to your wagon here, fasten your seatbelt. We're going for a bit of a jolty ride. This method of explanation, however, according to the Indian view that he's expounding, does not help us much in proving the existence of a perfect, all-powerful, and infinite God. For then we have to admit two beings, one the creator of good, and the other the creator of evil, which was the Persian idea, Zoroastrian, which will make each limited by the other and will take away all idea of omnipotence, that's a complete omnipotence, and infinity of the Supreme Being. I like to note paragraph changes sometimes because they're big chunks here. Those who believe that God is the first cause, capital F, capital C, of the universe, you might say, on the other hand, must determine the nature of that first cause, dash, whether he is the efficient or material cause. And he'll go and describe it, but I like the carpenter story, since Jesus was a carpenter. The efficient cause of a building is the carpenter. The material cause of the building is the wood, the lumber, the nails. And pretty soon we're going to find out that India has the idea that God is both the carpenter and the wood out of which he's building the universe. All right, what do you think, Swami? Got a thought?
Yeah, what about the tree?
Tell me about
Which causes the tree? The tree's the one that created the wood, so are we going to give it a name?
Well, yeah, that's a good thing. I mean, this sequence of cause and effect, that's what this whole thing about the first cause is kind of getting to. Very interesting. And I never thought this way till I ran into Swami Vivekananda. He has the idea, don't you see, that cause and effect, which is big time in Western thinking, particularly, let's say, in England, where we have come a lot of our intellectual orientation. What's this cause and effect thing that keeps on going? Hume thought about it a lot. And Swami says the effect then becomes the cause of the next coupling. Cause and effect, which becomes the cause of a new effect. And there's a lot of power in that concept of the sequence of moments of time. So he says we know that these two causes, efficient and material, are essential for the production of a thing, as, says he, in the case of a pot. The potter is the efficient, and the earth is the material cause. Now, if we say that God is the efficient or instrumental cause, carpenter, and the earth is the material, wait a minute. Now, if we say that God is the efficient or instrumental cause of the universe, like the maker of a pot, it would have been impossible for him, in that case, to create without the help of the material cause, which must have coexisted with the Creator. Here we are confronted with the same difficulty that God, who stands outside the material cause, in other words, he's just the carpenter, he's not the wood, is limited by matter. Therefore, he cannot be unlimited in the proper sense of the term. If, on the contrary, the material cause, if by the material cause be meant the meant first cause, then he must have gone through all the changes of evolution, God, which would make him like a changeable phenomenal object of the universe, a conclusion which we cannot accept. I need a pen for by which. Thank you. A moment, just a moment. A little word from our Creator. Oh, okay. So what we're talking about here is pretty simple if you diagram it, and it's fun to diagram it. We can do pretty well without the diagram, but we might even get the diagram. Circle, big circle, black circle on a white background. So shall we call that, shall we give it a name? Shall we think of it as a concrete thing? Let's call it the universe. And then God plus is outside the universe. You see? And he creates the universe and everything in it is separate from God. That's dualism. Our Father which art in heaven. And then supposing that we have this big circle and we move the plus into the middle of it and say the universe is God. Everything in the universe is spirit. That's called Pantheism. And then supposing we have a circle and we have God plus outside and plus inside, one God, no differentiation. That's called Pantheism. That yes, the universe, the material cause, the wood, is also God. And the efficient cause. They say the spider, spins the web out of herself. And in India, they said, take it back in. I saw a spider do that once. But God is not only the material things in the universe, in it. Everything is spirit, instinct. The American Indians are real good on this. All of the Sanatana Dharma, the perennial philosophy, the eternal religion people are, meaning the mystics of the world. So not only that, but with this idea that God is in the universe, is the universe, and somehow beyond space, time, and causation, that's the God kind of domain or dimension that India deals with. So the last little paragraph here, or at least the one we're into, let's just get it started, Swami. The moral argument that the moral laws presuppose a lawgiver cannot prove the existence of God, since we already, in parenthesis, know that natural laws do not presuppose a lawgiver. In the first place, we should understand what law, in quotes, means. Go, on with it. It's good.
The forces of nature are operating in the universe in certain modes, and when the regularity and uniformity of these modes are observed and interpreted by the human mind, they are called laws. Consequently, these laws are to be found neither in nature nor outside of it, but in the human mind. Secondly, as in external nature, the natural forces acting under regular modes do not presuppose a lawgiver, so it can be shown that the moral laws are but modes in which the natural forces operate on the moral process of the physical world. Furthermore, all such conceptions of God. I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's very interesting.
Let me read the sentence over again then. Secondly, as in external nature, the natural forces acting under regular modes do not presuppose a lawgiver, so it can be shown that the moral laws are but modes in which the natural forces operate on the moral plane, that they do not need a moral lawgiver, but their process is the same as the evolutionary process of the physical world. Furthermore, all such conceptions of God as the natural lawgiver or the moral lawgiver are rejected by advanced thinkers as the anthropomorphic ideas of uncultured minds. All these proofs and many other arguments like these, which are considered to be sufficient to establish the existence of an extra cosmic creator, ruler, or lawgiver of the universe are now thrown aside as imperfect and fallacious. In these days of science and reason, when we try to prove the existence of God, we do not search for a creator or fashioner of the world, or for a designer or first cause of the phenomenal universe, nor do we look for a moral lawgiver. Our conception of God has outgrown those stages of evolution and has become as large as the infinity of the universe. We no longer think that this earth is the stationary center around which the sun, moon, and other luminaries of the heavens revolve, moved by the supernatural power of angels who, according to the old-fashioned belief, dwelt above the blue dome of the sky overhead and moved these planets according to their whims and fancies. We are just beginning to understand the vastness of the universe. Modern astronomy has opened our eyes to the fact that this earth which we inhabit is to be considered as an infinitesimal point when compared with the immensity of space and with the innumerable cosmic bodies that exist above the horizon. We have learned that there are heavenly bodies beyond our solar system, the nearest one of which is so distant from us that its light, traveling at the rate of 186,000 miles per second, requires 3.5 years to reach our Earth. There are other stars so remote that thousands of years are needed for their light, traveling at the same rate, to arrive at our planet. We are assured that more than 1,000 million stars have been discovered by the telescope, and that there may be millions and millions of suns which are yet beyond the reach of our best instruments.
Well, I have to tell you, this just shines my shoes. I just get thrilled by this because the year is apparently 1920. So why don't we just for fun delegate, relegate, feel like an African American preacher now, or designate, just for fun, tonight, sake of argument. 1920 is the beginning of the modern age. You know, the 19th century is that funny thing that gets us all confused about how old we are and, you know, what do you do the first year the baby's born? He's not even 1 year old. The baby's not born. She doesn't get to be 1 year old, so she's got all that in the bank. She's 3 months anyway. The 19th century sounds like one thing, but that's the 1800s. The 20th century sounds like a whole big deal. And it did to the people in 1896. The 20th century is coming, a whole new day. But it was only 1900s. It was just like all, very different. But by golly, the age we're in now in the 2000s, we're in it. We're in the new millennium. We're in a big new time. And let's say it started in 1920. This is like they call postmodern. This is definitely a post-19th century or 1800s man speaking. And all the issues of the day. I didn't know that he knew 186,000 miles a second. And when he says that there, a billion, 1,000 million, of course, is a billion stars, how about in our galaxy, they don't know from day to day. It's just gone up something from 200 million to 200 billion stars in our Milky Way galaxy to 300 billion. Most of which are binary stars, 2 stars. Half of them. Not most of them, say half. And I'm going to say that the preponderance of these planets, more often than not, more often than you might think, these stars have planets around them. Now, when he talks about the light coming, say 3.5 years from the nearest star, we say like 4, Alpha Centauri, Proxima. Alpha Centauri itself is a double star. a true double. They're circling around each other. I suppose that's it. But there's also some kind of another little thing in there. Anyway, Proxima, the closest to us. Now, it's kind of fun to extend the horizon of your mind, but you better be prepared. Like they say, the God of these scientific people is an awesome God. The God of the states, where education in the United States is at a premium. The God of those states, as one presidential candidate said at some recent time in history, is an awesome God. When they found out that those little wisps of cloud they call nebulae, that means cloud in Latin, are not inside our own Milky Way nebula, but they're outside. He's talking about however long it took for the light to come, 3.5 years. How about billions of years? Millions for sure, 500 million? They do with those stars on a regular basis. I mean, if you really want to get your mind boggled, like scrambled eggs for breakfast in the morning, if you want to do it, like going for a treatment or something, mind-boggling massage of your head, we can probably see back to 13.7 now, but just round it off to 13 billion years. We've thought about this before. Just try it sometime, but be sure you're at home and leave the phone on. Make sure somebody can reach you if they need to and so forth. Light traveling at 100, are you with me? And 86,000, you got that one right, miles per second for 13 billion years. Now, the scientists, the ones that really want to help you understand, they got it all figured out. The universe has been expanding during that whole time. So the actual distances are a little bit different than you might think. But the time, yeah, is huge. It's just immense. Now, if you want to talk about spiritual uplift, divine spiritual uplift, this is going to take you pretty high, isn't it? Up above, what is it? Yeah. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, somewhere over the rainbow. Birds fly over the, why, oh, why can't I? So the Swami was predictive, these new telescopes. But this is what we have to deal with, one way or the other. If you want an old-time religion, give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Old-time religion, well, it's good enough for me. It was good for Paul and Silas. It was good for Paul and Silas. Good for my dear mama, and it's good enough for me. But for the preacher. But when you got stuff this, and you're still trying to wrap God around it, or in it, or it somehow, you got some major acceleration. And believe it or not, this is the old time religion. Carl Sagan was the man that put on the first episode, 13 of them, the Cosmos, during years, broke the bank for the public TV station, put it on. And he was one of these guys that did not really cotton up to an anthropomorphic concept of God. So he's an agnostic. He goes to India and he falls in. I've seen him use a half hour, but 15 bullet carts going everywhere. He was just so excited. Same thing happened to Mark Twain, who was considered skeptical, not about religion, but about religiosity. Go around puncturing people's balloons like Voltaire did in France. He goes there, he loves it. You know why? They had the ballpark figure for the age of the universe right. They say in India that the cycle that we're in now, in their mind, went back 4 billion years. In the West, they couldn't even think 4 billion years. What is it, 4008 BC?
That was something like that.
Yeah, that's the best they could come up with. So I'm just saying that we've got a whole new ball field, and if you want to expand your mind and heart and still have some kind of divinity in here, you've got an awesome God. All right. I need help, Swami.
That's as far right at the top of the page, isn't it?
Thus, as far as we can get by stretching our imagination. That's exactly what we're asked to do. We do not find any limit or boundary to the universe. I have a little problem with him on that score. He's trying to say that the universe is infinite through Einstein and various other philosophical and scientific premises. I like to think of everything that we see as finite. Space, time, all that, I think of as finite. Only God is infinite. So Einstein would try to explain that to us. We do not find a limit or boundary to the universe. We still have the feeling that there is something beyond. Now, that's true. We have a kind of a instinctive whatever, maybe just affecting our mind. This sense of something existing beyond what we know and perceive is always with us. See, we're beyond time and space now. We cannot get rid of it. So there's in for introspection, your own psychology. You see what you feel experientially. Even when we try to perceive a finite object, that sense of beyond is most intimately connected with our perception and conception of it. There is a feeling of the infinite very closely associated with all our ideas and concepts. I feel it. I'm going to say, don't you? It's like the baby in the bath, man. We're floating in an ocean. An ocean of existence. And we certainly don't limit it to this room. There is a feeling of the infinite very closely associated with all our ideas and concepts. Take, for instance, the geometrical figure of a square. Now, this is going to be interesting, because a square is pretty limited, you know. There's something about those straight lines and right angles. It's an intellectual concept if there ever was one. Because you don't find it in nature like that, hardly ever. We see it as a figure enclosed by 4 straight lines. But at the same time, there's a feeling of the space beyond. Otherwise, we could not perceive the square. Well, frankly, I'm knocked off my pins by this, because I like it. I feel it. Take it scientifically, logically, left hemisphere, or emotionally, aesthetically, holistic. I like it. Are you aware, Swami, you hardly ever see a square in nature, but are you aware that the hexagon, the beehive thing, is just shot through nature? And just recently, looking at the North Pole of Saturn, they found a cloud formation right on top. It's a hexagon. Isn't that fun? I can't read anymore right now.
That's a long way for the bees to go.
I didn't know that. Well, we're talking about being, you know, the essence of being. I don't like to do that.
Again, when we look at the space which is circumscribed by the horizon, we do not lose the sense that there is something beyond that limit. The infinite space extends beyond the visible horizon. The same perception of limitlessness or of the infinite is closely associated with the idea of time. We cannot conceive either its beginning or its end. There always remains the sense of the eternal beyond, both before and after our conception of time. In this way, we get the perception of eternity. The human mind is so peculiarly constituted that it is incapable of finding the absolute defined limit of anything of the world. Trees, mountains, rivers, earth, sun, moon, and all other objects of the senses are tangible, but we do not find any definite. But do we find any definite limit when we carefully analyze our perceptions of these objects? No, we do not. We may do our best, but we are sure to discover sooner or later that there is a sense of beyond constantly attached to them.
So, may I have it just for a second? I just invite each of us, because at some level, there's always the dimension, let's say, of art in the Vedanta perspective. And I don't mean that just in terms of a painting that somebody just drew with a painting. There's some wonderful paintings going on in LA these days on murals. I mean, excellent, from impoverished neighborhoods in town. But I'm talking about the word aesthetic, which in philosophy means something of direct experience, as composed to a merely mental concept or an intellectual concept that is somehow not directly a result of experience. Well, and incidentally, that experience thing I like to say is the foundation of American philosophy. They call it pragmatism. It's kind of an awkward word. It means fixing the tire on the freeway. That's pretty much the essence, of William James's whole philosophy in terms of the value of a concept or the value of a church's panoply. And that is, speaking of a tree, by their fruits you shall know them. And if down here, after all these logical constructs, like the tributaries give us what we have today, if there's something wrong, hey, with the end product, every church has not only the right but the responsibility to evaluate itself and its performance like every day by this standard. If there's something wrong in the end product, know that not to be religion, not to be truth. There's something, James says, back up yonder in the sequence of logical cause and effect, that's wrong. That's appearance and not reality. So American philosophy is based on experience. I don't know about you, but I get a thrill, as we say in New York. A thrill. Literally, physiologically, aesthetically, direct experience when I read stuff like this. What is the man asking us to do? He's saying, hey, play for a while, splash a little bit in the pond. He's asking us to feel. He's asking us, as William James suggested, to have an introspection of the inner experiences of our own mind and heart. And I love it, because whether it comes out this way or that way or right or wrong, we have not only the right, but the opportunity to form our own discernment of the events of experience that are going on within our own mind and heart. And as these Indians, I got a feeling Toynbee's got all these different ideas about different latitudes, let's say, or different places you're born on Earth. The Eskimos are pretty busy most of the year staying alive. Maybe they have very long winters, kind of like a hibernation. But the people that live on the tropical islands, have to go roll over and catch a fish. In the traditional days, it wasn't that hard to make a living, to stay alive, and they had time on their hands. So meditation seems to have been discovered in the equatorial, the tropical, the subtropical belt. I call it the Avatar belt. The Bible belt, and the corn and hog belt and all that. I come from the corn and hog belt. That's above the Bible belt. And then there's the Avatar belt. And all of the super luminaries seem to come from warm countries like that. So we're invited. The Indians are inviting us to sit down. One thing about this coronavirus is that some Americans are going berserk. They're asked to stay home. It's like sense deprivation, and they're getting stark crazy. They're getting cabin fever, so the first chance they run out and try to go to a ball game, no ball game. And it's a problem for many of us. The Indians say, sit down. Be comfortable. Sit as straight as you can, but comfortably. Close your eyes and start examining your feelings. Just going with them, enjoying them. And then see if there's any sense of feelings beyond the very small circumference of your head, the bony cranium. Is that the only location of mind? Whitehead says no. The fallacy of simple location. Misplaced concreteness. Your mind can reach as far as the furthest star, not the nearest one. It may not be exactly like a literal link, but you can try to imagine, and you do. So he's asking us to use the incredible technique of personal experience within your own examination, introspection. So, Swami, please continue. I just had to say something. I was so excited.
Let us take an illustration. Suppose we stand under a big oak tree. We may look at it, touch it, smell it, but can we perceive the absolute limit of that tree? Do our senses take in the whole tree at one time? No, our senses cannot reach its deepest roots or its highest branches, nor do we know what is going on under the bark or in the leaves. It is impossible for anyone to take in the whole tree at one time. We may take it in by parts, but at the same time, the perception of each part will, under all circumstances, leave in our minds the sense of beyond. Again, when we think of the innumerable atoms and molecules that make up the body of that tree, its finite form vanishes, leaving all impressions that we call tree. What we call tree is indeed an expression of the infinite. For when the form is gone, that which is left of the tree is inseparable from the infinite ocean of some substance imperceptible to the senses. Moreover, when we try to know the power or force that gives form to that tree and makes it living, which cannot be separated from it, then in one sense we must say that the tree has in it something intangible, mysterious, and unknowable. We cannot help it.
Okay, I'm willing to jump in again if you will let me. In the same manner, it can be shown that every finite perception or conception of an object brings with it a sense of beyond. I think so. I feel so. A perception of the infinite or something that is unknown and unknowable, of something that is eternal. It happened to me when I first went to Trabuco a few days ago. I was ushered into a place that's a little like a planetarium. And talk about sensory deprivation. You go in, especially if you got retinal fatigue, your eyes are still, dazzled with sunlight. It's pitch black in there. And it was in those days, and it was a deep thing down. And they sat me down, left me alone. Even that's something. Sensuous deprivation, definitely. As your eyes get used to it, yeah, you can see a little bit of this, that, and the other. But you shut your eyes, and there you go again. And I felt this presence of something. It's no big deal. It's just the examination of your own internal state. I felt something. An atmosphere. Bigger than I was. And this place was all dark. And it not only did that, but go over your head and be behind your head. Now, it's that sort of thinking that leads some of our modern philosophers, like a guy named Northrop, F.S.C. Northrop, one of Whitehead's students, to get all kinds of marvelous intuitions of the depth of experience in which we're swimming like fish. Do fish know about water? Do we know about air? It's very interesting. But there's this sense that can be accessed. And we can't go into it tonight, but there's just so much to it. It's Northrop that used this idea of the aesthetic, trying to describe to us that there's a whole way of looking at reality, at the world in which we're immersed in terms of experience, as well as, or different from, analyzing it intellectually. And his idea is that science, well, what he's saying is what I like to put it, the criterion of validity for science and spirituality is the same. It's experience. That tree thing, just goes on beyond belief. one of the greatest things Whitehead ever understood clearly, Whitehead being the great English metaphysician who, when he came to the United States, he became the world's greatest metaphysician, both process and reality. And I was able to meet not only Northrop, but a fellow named Paul Weiss, whom I adored, studied under him. And he was able to simplify a lot of this turgid prose, very difficult, but he admired Whitehead's prose. He said, did Paul Weiss, everything, this is huge. It's a different way of looking at the world. Everything is something on the outside and on the inside. Then he said everything is something from the outside and from the inside. But that statement that everything is something on the inside is what the West desperately needs. Because don't tell me why, I don't understand with this idea that God made everything, like a football, they kicked it. That's the idea of the deists, Tom Jefferson and all. And once he kicked the universe and got started, he didn't really need him anymore, just standing by wood. Hey, that materialistic view has no room for an insight to anything but you. Such a, but you. You're the only subject in the whole world. And therefore, with the mechanistic idea of Isaac Newton, yeah, bless him, and Descartes, that was a whole world view. Scientific, and the planets seem to confirm it, The law is in effect, and they'll be there 1,000 years from now. You can figure it out mathematically. Hey, it don't work because, you see, that means you can dominate. You can make a cog in the wheel of your machine, of every material object on Earth, all of the natural resources, the metals, the plants, the trees, cut them all down, whether you need to or not, and all of a sudden we've lost the lungs of the world. And worst of all, with this materialistic, mechanistic is the word I'm looking for, machine view of the unit, of the cosmos, you can treat every human being, say every other human being, excepting the big I am, the big ego, the self-centered concept, which is false, as a cog in your machine. You can't. Employees in your factory. I'm sorry, but I get all excited about this stuff. It sounds a little bit theoretical or academic words. It's the very essence. As soon as we discovered that a tree has an inside, a personality, a subjective experience, our whole world, our whole view of the universe is expanding. When we walk by a plant, a flower now, we try to see Brahman in yet another form, and yet pretty soon we see it. We go by, there's a feeling in the plant. And that feeling has no limit. That feeling's one with infinity. There is a view that if you can think of God, then God must exist. Called the argument, the ontological argument. Well, just a little tweak on this, and you make of it what you will. My thoughts are going to Europe a lot these days for whatever reason. In France, not near Paris. Paris, like any big city, but particularly France, it kind of absorbs all of France in people's eyes, the ones that live there. Hey, you go to middle France, South France, you're getting into some wonderful, wonderful country, like going to the national parks and mountains. And I went to a simple shrine one time. It was not like in a church with a lot of fancy stuff going on, where there was a table for the Eucharist, for the bread and wine. And there was a wonderful priest that came through. French priests, they're just so loving and friendly. Like New York cops are very friendly. I mean, children in their days. When I grew up, Irish cops in those days when I was young. But the truth is, don't you know, here's this wonderful priest, and he loved us. And he must, they're pretty sharp. You can quickly find out we probably grew up in some other church. But he really loved us, and he had his true. So here was this little table in a room here somewhere, and the Eucharist vessels, ultimate simplicity. And I finally understood. I finally did, my friends, at least satisfied me, what the Church Universal means when it talks about transubstantiation in the Eucharist, communion. Bread and wine become the blood and body of Christ. Literally. And all of a sudden I realized with this Einsteinian worldview of physics today, everything has an inside. Everything has its own subjective experience. The wine and the blood and the bread and the body of Christ mean that you have finally seen in a spiritual mood that the essence from the inside of these items is spirit. Not just spiritual. That church universe said, no, we mean it literally. Yeah, we do too. The spiritual reality is that if one thing exists, God exists. If one thing exists truly with this spiritual inside, Jesus, for example, is a human being of the highest. It's terribly exciting. So yes, the blood, the body, pretty difficult stuff for some people to get those words. The bread and the wine really literally is Christ. And what the church in the West has difficulty with, not in the East, not the mystics in the West, is that oneness is the essence of Christ's reality, which is spirit with a capital S. So anyway, what we're reading tonight, kids, is Deep Tracks in the Snow. Take over. So I don't even know what's happening anymore.
We have a couple minutes left.
All right. Where are you? I don't even know.
Oh, yeah, we're at the last paragraph on page 383.
There you go.
Just barely didn't have time to read that. All right. In the same manner, it can be shown that every Pardon? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go.
In the same manner, it can be shown that every finite perception or conception of an object brings with it a sense of beyond, a perception of the infinite, or something that is unknown and unknowable, of something that is eternal.
Glory. Somebody say glory.
Glory.
You are glory.
Take a drop of water, which is finite, put it under the microscope, and you will see infinitesimal atoms moving about, some clearly visible, some so minute that they are hardly perceptible with the help of the most powerful microscope. Yet modern chemistry tells us that we can ascertain the relative positions of these atoms so minutely that millions upon millions of them could stand upon the point of a needle. Is not the infinitude of this small drop of water as wonderful as the infinity of space? Indeed, the drop of water is finite and infinite at the same time. When we see a flower or touch it, we cannot help realizing in the same way that it is the finite appearance of that something which we cannot know, which is finite and eternal. Yeah, I wonder if it was supposed to be infinite. Yeah, I have a feeling it should have said infinite, don't you? It is like a beautiful painting upon the canvas of that eternal, invisible substance of the universe, which the senses cannot perceive, which the mind cannot grasp or comprehend. It is the expression of that infinite matter which fills all space. No one can deny the existence of this substance, which appears to our senses in an infinite variety of forms and shapes.
To see infinity in a wildflower. Hold eternity in the palm of your hand and see infinity in a wildflower.
All right, so we shall sign off and stay tuned until next September when we resume.
Let them know what's happening.
Yes, we'll be, the Friday night class takes a summer break in July and August, so we will resume sometime in September. We may still be doing everything online. We don't know, of course, but that's looks like the way things are going. All right. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Peace, peace, peace.
So everyone stay well, be well, as they say in South Africa at the same time. And let's all think of God. Jai Ma.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.